into our elbow, wrist, and hand lab, I wanted to provide you with special tests as well as the neurological test for the elbow, wrist, and hand. First, we'll discuss the elbow, where there's 7 special tests that you'll need to know, followed by the wrist and hand, of which there's 10 special tests that which you'll need to know. We'll end with the neurological function of the elbow, wrist, and hand as well. The first 3 special tests for the elbow implicate tennis elbow or pain over the lateral epicondyle or lateral epicondylitis. The first special test we want to cover is the Cosen's test. And that's a test that you're going to remember because you're going to have to apply resistance to wrist extension. So we want to have the athlete seated or they can be standing. The athletic trainer is going to stabilize the athlete's elbow with their thumb over the lateral epicondyle of the lateral elbow. We're going to instruct the athlete to make a fist, pronate their forearm, radially deviate, and extend the wrist. The athletic trainer is going to continue to palpate the lateral epicondyle while resisting the motion of radial deviation and wrist extension. A positive test at this will elicit pain at the lateral epicondyle, implicating lateral epicondylitis. Again, this is Cosen's test. The second of the 3 tennis elbow tests, Mills' test, is a passive test. Again, the athlete's going to be seated or they can be standing. The athletic trainer is going to palpate and stabilize that lateral epicondyle. They're going to passively pronate the forearm, flex the wrist, and while they have the forearm pronated and wrist flexed, they're going to extend the elbow. A positive test occurs when they have pain is elicited over the lateral epicondyle. Keep in mind, this also will stress the radial nerve and can elicit symptoms similar to tennis elbow. The way we're going to differentiate radial nerve pathology from lateral epicondyle pathology is with an EMG. Again, this test implicates tennis elbow. We start. The second of the 3 tennis elbow tests is Mills' test, and the Mills' test is a passive test. Again, the athlete will be seated or standing while the athletic trainer is going to palpate the lateral epicondyle. The athletic trainer is going to passively pronate the forearm, flex the wrist, and while those are flexed and pronated, you're going to extend the elbow passively. A positive test occurs when there's pain over the lateral epicondyle. This implicates tennis elbow. You must keep in mind, though, that this test also may stress the radial nerve and can elicit symptoms that are similar to tennis elbow. The way we'll differentiate between tennis elbow and radial nerve pathology is with an EMG. The third of our tennis elbow tests is the Maudsley's test. Maudsley's test is going to involve resisting the middle finger. The athlete will be seated with their arm resting on the table, or in this case, he's going to have his arm resting on his thigh. With my finger over his lateral epicondyle, with his wrist pronated, I'm going to resist extension of his 3rd digit, the extensor digitorum muscle. Push back. Pain over the lateral epicondyle will implicate lateral epicondylitis or the extensor tendinitis. Our next test is the medial epicondylitis test, also known as Goffer's elbow test. The athlete can be seated or standing while the athletic trainer palpates the medial epicondyle. The forearm is supinated while the wrist and elbow are passively extended. Pain over the medial epicondyle will implicate medial epicondylitis. Our next stress test for the elbow is the valgus stress test. With the valgus stress test, the athlete can stand, sit, or lie supine. Our forearm will be in maximum supination. We want to try to make sure we limit external rotation at the shoulder while keeping the elbow flexed between 10 and 25 degrees. This is also a test that can be done at varying degrees of flexion. The athletic trainer will have one hand on the lateral elbow while palpating the the medial side of the elbow with his fingers. The opposite hand is on the distal forearm. A valgus force, this direction, will be applied to the ulnar collateral ligament while palpating the medial joint. A positive test occurs when laxity or pain is in that medial joint, and that implicates the ulnar collateral ligament injury. Our next stress test for the elbow is going to implicate the lateral elbow, the varus stress test. The varus stress test will have the athlete standing with the elbow in 20 to 30 degrees of flexion and the forearm in maximum supination. The athletic trainer is going to have one hand on the medial elbow, the opposite hand will be on the distal forearm with the fingers palpating the lateral joint. A varus force, this direction, is applied to the elbow in that 20 to 30 degree range, and a positive test implicates the lateral collateral ligament in the elbow. Our last special test is the Tinel sign for the elbow. The athlete can be seated or standing while the athletic trainer stabilizes the forearm with their opposite hand tapping the ulnar nerve in the cubital tunnel. Posterior to the medial epicondyle, simply tapping the ulnar nerve, a tingling sensation from the ulnar nerve down into the wrist and hand is a positive test that implicates ulnar nerve pathology.